At dawn on Wuzhou Mountain, craftsmen started their daily toil. Amid the sounds of axes and chisels, a 17-meter tall Buddha statue was erected in Cave 5. It's the largest Buddha statue in the Yungang Grottoes, with a sharply cut nose, thin eyebrows, and lips curved upward in a gracious smile. However, after over 1,000 years, an unusual discovery was made in Cave 5. The cliff face of this cave was filled with various small niches, haphazardly arranged, without a unified design or chronological order.
Also, to the west of the southern cliff, there's a section claimed by wealthy individuals. It was not caved by the government nor by the imperial family, but added later.
It was the same with Cave 11 and other mid to late caves. How did such inconsistencies arise in these imperial caves? Outside the caves, what events unfolded that compelled craftsmen to abandon their work before completion as planned? And what led to Yungang's transformation from imperial to privately owned, and eventually to an unclaimed land? In the Taihe era of Emperor Xiaowen's reign, the Northern Wei Empire was at the zenith of power. By this time, northern China was unified. The Rouran people threatening the borders were driven back after a series of military defeats. Domestically, Emperor Xiaowen and Empress Dowager Feng were methodically implementing a series of reforms. At the Yungang Grottoes beneath Wuzhou Mountain, two important caves were under construction, known today as Cave 5 and Cave 6. Cave 5 was dedicated by Emperor Xiaowen, Talbahong, to his father, Emperor Xianwen. He built the tallest statue in Yungang for his father. The adjacent Cave 6 was dedicated to his nominal grandmother, Empress Dowager Feng. He had to strike a balance between the two, who shared a tumultuous history. Of these two caves, while Cave 5 is celebrated for its grand stature, Cave 6 stands out for its exquisite details. One won't find any uncarved stone in Cave 6. Everywhere was delicately decorated. It depicts an incredibly vibrant Buddhist world in a splendid and grand style. It's known as the first grand cave of Yungang. Many consider it the most beautiful in Yungang, and a museum of Northern Wei sculpture. Cave 6 differed from Cave 5 in its structural form. The cave is square with a flat ceiling. At its center stands a 15-meter tall pillar resembling a pagoda reaching up to the ceiling. It's called the central pagoda pillar. Structurally, this pillar supports the ceiling. In a Buddhist sense, to see a pagoda is to see the Buddha. The pagoda originated from ancient Indian stupas, which enshrined relics of the Buddha. At Yungang, these structures were syncretized by adding a Chinese-style roof. Cave 6 housed over 2,900 sculptures that extol the grace of the Buddha's mother and document Sakyamuni's life. It particularly emphasizes the nurturing care of the Buddha's mother. On the square pagoda pillar in Cave 6, the Buddhas are seen preparing for their mother's appearance. Like Kunda, Prajnapramitha, Mahamayuri, etc. These conceptual mothers from Buddhist scriptures manifest here on the Yungang's pillar. To meet their sons. Everything praises the grace and virtue of the mother. The theme of filial piety characterized the mid-northern Way's sculpture. Cave 9, for instance, tells the story of Syama Jataka, a story of filial duty. The filial Syama was fetching water from a river, when accidentally killed by a hunting king. On his deathbed, he still worried about his blind parents. This moved the Buddha, who granted him rebirth.
Why emphasize such stories? They advocate it, they preach it, they want all to believe it. It was the truth. And to pay their filial duty to their parents.
Apart from that, Cave 6 expresses another important theme, the story of Sakyamuni's life, which unfolds along the cave's walls and its central pillar. Bas-reliefs create a narrative sequence to make a comic strip, with over 30 scenes, depicting Sakyamuni's journey from birth to becoming a monk. This is the most complete depiction of Sakyamuni's life events, preserved in bas-relief form in China. Sakyamuni's mother, Queen of Kapilavatthu, Mayadevi dreamed of a white elephant, and gave birth to Sakyamuni from her armpit, which is integral to the Buddha's biography. The central pillar of Cave 6 captures the moment of Sakyamuni's birth, with Mayadevi holding an Asoka branch, raising her right arm, with an infant half exposed from her right side. Her sister supports her from the left side. A nearby bodhisattva, arms crossed over the chest, shows overwhelming excitement. This marks Sakyamuni's legendary birth. The surrounding walls depict the wonders of Prince Siddhartha Gautama's life through his growth and journey. It's a story of the arrow-piercing 7 drums, highlighting a youthful Sakyamuni competing in archery against his kinsman. Gifted with extraordinary strength, he shot an arrow through 7 drums made of gold, silver, brass, iron, stone, etc. On the corner of the east and south walls, 4 continuous frames depict scenes from Siddhartha's life. Prince Siddhartha, complacent in life, discovers distress and its remedy in the mundane world. Prince Siddhartha meets an elderly man at the eastern gate of the capital, a painful patient at the southern gate, and a funeral at the western gate. And at last, at the northern gate, he meets a serene monk. Through these encounters, he finds the key to transcending worldly sorrow. Thereafter, he sneaks over the city walls to renounce the world. The walls of Cave 6 contain 4 distinct levels. Sakyamuni's biography begins at the 2nd level and progresses to the 3rd level. Dividing these levels are decorative bands, featuring designs like honeysuckles.
By the 5th century, these anthemion designs began to flourish. This kind of pattern was introduced from Persia. In the Yungang Grottoes, a lavish use of the anthemia helps distinguish the 3rd level.
The 3rd level of Cave 6's walls depicted some stories following Sakyamuni's enlightenment. Still, upward, a lotus petal motif marks the 4th level, where 11 brilliant statues of Sakyamuni stand 3.8 meters tall. surrounded by supporting bodhisattvas, which presents a grave and grand spectacle. When viewed in its entirety, Cave 6's narrative of the Buddha's life presents a tantalizing mystery. This cave's depiction of the Buddha's life left out a mystery. That is, the story of Sakyamuni's nirvana. After Sakyamuni attained enlightenment, his later infirmity, reportedly, made him lie on his side under the Asoka tree and pass away painless and peaceful. Why was such a significant event absent in the Buddha's biographies? The answer is hidden in the central pillar.
In this cave, we narrate the story of the Buddha's entire life. From his descent by the elephant, to his birth from the armpit, and then his tour of the 4 gates, leaving for renunciation, and his sermon at the deer park after attaining enlightenment. All these episodes are depicted here, except for his ultimate nirvana, which is quite strange. Throughout his life, nirvana was a very important episode. But in Cave 6, none is about nirvana. You see, the design is remarkably intricate. It circles the entire cave and concludes the narrative with this pagoda.
It's said that after nirvana, Sakyamuni's relics were buried by his disciples beneath the pagoda. Thus, the pagoda represents the Buddha, the pagoda signifies nirvana. The pagoda pillar in Cave 6 itself symbolizes the moment when Sakyamuni attained enlightenment. The exquisitely splendid Cave 6 reaches the pinnacle of craftsmanship of its time. For instance, on the pillar's southern side, the niches are intricately designed and carved. Excluding flora and fauna, there are over 170 Buddha sculptures alone. The seated Buddhas in the niche are depicted with eyes exuding grace. The curving long patterns at the shoulders and knees reflect a dignified and special status. On the pillar's north facade, 2 Buddha sculptures housed in a single niche are nearly identical in appearance. This type of image set is known as a pair of seated Buddhas, or the seated pair of Sakyamuni and Prabhudaratna. This was a popular motif since Yungan's midterm project. It also symbolizes the 2 sage rulers during the co-reign of Emperor Xiaowen and Empress Dowager Feng. Emperor Xiaowen dedicated this exquisite cave to Empress Dowager Feng. Such kind of cave could only have been created with a wealth of engineering and sculptural expertise in a peaceful and stable social context. Among the Yungang Grottoes, it is just like a bright flower, and regarded by many as the pinnacle work of the Yungang Grottoes. As the major patron of this cave, Emperor Xiaowen had complex feelings toward Empress Dowager Feng, the iron-fisted ruler of the Northern Wei dynasty. Although she raised him herself, she forced his mother's death, poisoned his father, and tightly controlled him thereafter. Perhaps at some point, when this young emperor witnessed the birth of this cave, on the cave wall, the Buddha's mother reaching for the Asoka tree, and the infant's cry echoing through time and space, Emperor Xiaowen's love and hate grew even more entangled. Palace rivalries and vendettas transformed into serene, kind visages, and wisps of rising incense smoke. History was thus infused into the caves, and the caves bear the imprint of this history. These relics in Datong Museum were unearthed from the Yonggu tomb. Each relic bears the legend of Empress Dowager Feng. Her tomb, according to the records, was completed in the 13th year of the Taihe era. The completion of this massive project was timely, as the following winter. Empress Dowager Feng, who ruled for 2 generations of monarchs, passed away. Here's a stone arch gate of the Yongu tomb, connecting the antechamber to the rear passageway. Each side is engraved with a Kamara holding a lotus. Each side of the stone pillar has a backward-gazing peafowl with a gem in its mouth. The pillar's bottom has the shape of a beast's head. This archway, a masterpiece of Northern Wei sculpture, also testified to historical records about this royal tomb. According to the Choreographia of Datong Prefecture, the Yongu tomb was completed 8 years after the 5th year of the Taihe era. Built on a grand scale, it is one of the biggest unearthed mausoleums from the northern and southern dynasties. This magnificent mausoleum is also typical of the Northern Wei royal mausoleums. This Empress Dowager, who held absolute power during her life, demonstrated her enduring presence in this remarkable way. Emperor Xiaowen expressed his filial piety to the extreme, too. A mile north of the Yongu tomb, he built a much smaller tomb for himself, called Wan Yenteng. Upon Empress Dowager Feng's death, Emperor Xiaowen was deeply grieved. He announced to his ministers that he'd be buried with Feng posthumously, and observed the 3-year mourning period. Considering the state affairs, his ministers advised against it.
As to the mourning practice he'd observe, Xiaowen frequently debated with his ministers. They requested a shortened period, but he insisted on a longer duration. They requested a simple ceremony, while he preferred a grand one. Such decisions seemed to affirm his filial devotion.
Strictly observing the 3-year mourning period, he abstained from rich foods and intimate relations. Till half a year later, did he take in some vegetables. And before 494 AD, there were indeed no birth records at the palace. But no one knew Emperor Xiaowen's true intentions behind his filial actions. Was it to honor Feng's memory, or to placate her circle of influence? We only know that after a smooth transition of power, he began achieving remarkable feats. When his mourning period ended, he made a significant decision: to marshal all the kingdom's forces against the southern dynasties. Military campaigns against them were common at the time, so no one could foresee what Emperor Xiaowen actually intended. East of Cave 5 of the Yungang Grottoes lies a gully. There's a Dragon King temple on the mountain, so local villagers call it the Dragon King Temple Gully. On the eastern side of this gully is the eastern section of the Yungang Grottoes. The 4 caves here are the Yungang Grottoes, caves 1 through 4, collectively known as the East 4 Caves. Caves 1 and 2 are situated at the easternmost of the Yungang Grottoes. When visitors begin their tour from the east, they first encounter Caves 1 and 2. This numbering system, from east to west, is convenient for identifying the cave's spatial distribution. However, it does not reflect the chronological order of cave excavation. In fact, Caves 1 and 2 were caved much later. Yet they are adjacent and share a similar structural style. Both caves feature a design centered around a pagoda pillar. Cave 1's square central pillar has 2 stories, both sculpted to resemble wooden attics. Han Chinese culture had already seamlessly blended with Xianbei culture. On the east and west walls of Cave 1, there are depictions of Buddhist scripture parables, which were mostly weathered. Only Syama Jakata's story is still recognizable. The theme of filial piety, present in Cave 9, continues to be reflected here. Cave 2's central pillar comprises 3 stories, slightly larger than that of Cave 1, but shows greater signs of weathering, imbuing it with a rich sense of history. As for Cave 3, though located east in the Yungang Grottoes, it isn't connected to the easternmost Caves 1 and 2. Visitors need to walk another several dozen meters westward to reach it. Cave 3 is about 50 meters wide from east to west, with a 25-meter-high exterior cliff. This front of the cave is special. Rather than having a plain facade, it features a terrace formed by 2 intersecting surfaces. 1/3 of its height above the ground, a platform with a depth of 7.5 meters was set. This platform was hollowed into a square cave. 15 meters from the east and west ends of the platform, a square 3-story pagoda is carved, with niches and sculptures on all sides. The uppermost of the facades has 12 evenly spaced rectangular holes in the rafter lintel. These were clearly intended for the wooden hull that once covered the front space. From these large and numerous holes, together with the broad front area, we can infer that a grand and magnificent temple once stood there. The Yungang Grottoes once boasted a stretch of 10 temples. Cave 3 is said to be the Lingyan Temple, the most magnificent of all those temples. So historically, for a long period, the Lingyan Temple was mistakenly referred to as the Yungang Grottoes. Cave 3, over 40 meters wide, 15 meters deep and almost 20 meters high, is the largest of the Yungang Grottoes, and the largest of China's Buddhist caves. Excavating a cave of this size requires extensive removal of earth and rock.
We surveyed it. In that cave, the rock used for sculpting was over 86,000 cubic meters. Isn't that enormous?
Yungang turned its mountains into cliffs and caves, while the excavations left a large quantity of rocks.
We found during the carving process that the rocks were deliberately carved into various shapes, such as round, flat, and millstone-shaped, among other things.
Carving yielded these rocks. So, where did those rocks that had been preliminarily worked end up? In 1995, cultural relic professionals in Datong City, Shaanxi Province found near Xianyang Street in the city an ancient architectural site. After their study, they concluded that this was Northern Wei's Bright Hall, a type of ritual structure in the culture of the Central Plains. It was where the imperial family held sacrifices and other ceremonies. This Bright Hall found in urban Datong is a circular structure, with a circumference of 900 meters, surrounded by a wide man-made waterway. After a careful survey, the archaeological team made a key finding. The rocks for the Bright Hall and the waterway, judged by both color and texture, were all from the Yungang Grottoes. For many who have visited the Yungang Grottoes, the sight before you can be quite astonishing. In 2010, the Datong municipal government undertook a large-scale conservation of the Yungang Grottoes, based on historical descriptions. to restore the grottos to their former glory. Northern Wei geographer Li Daoyuan, who had visited Yungan, described in his commentary on the Waterways Classic, that, amid its mountain halls and water palaces stretched incense-filled temples. At the time, a river called Wuzhuchuan flowed past the Yungang Grottoes. It was from this river that the mountain halls and water palaces were created. The leftover stone materials of all sizes from the carving process were transported along the Wuzhuchuan River to Pingcheng for urban construction and daily life.
The river lay at the front of the mountain. So in our subsequent archaeological work, still at the front of the Yungang Grottoes, about 40 to 50 meters away, we found the course of Wuzhuchuan, the river from the Northern Wei period. So its river course is right here.
According to historical records, the construction of the Bright Hall was proposed by Emperor Xiaowen in the 10th year of the Taihe era. It was completed 5 years later, just after Empress Feng had passed away. The reforms, including the equal field system and salary system which she led with Emperor Xiaowen, had been finished. The state entered its period of prosperity. In the 16th year of the Taihe era, Emperor Xiaowen visited the Bright Hall for a sacrifice to heaven and divination. Histories told that his plan for the southward campaign obliged him to come for a divination. But in fact, few knew of another motive behind his actions. Under the guise of a southward campaign, Talba Hong led a reportedly million-strong Xianbei force out of Pingcheng, where he had lived for 28 years. This grand and highly spirited southward army halted in Luoyang. Talba Hong declared suddenly the relocation of the capital to Luoyang. It was only then that people realized that under the guise of war, he sought to evade the enormous opposition forces in Pingcheng to realize his long-schemed plan of relocating the capital.
Emperor Xiaowen himself was an ambitious ruler with tremendous statecraft. He knew that Pingcheng was inadequate to continue his enterprise. However, he faced strong resistance from the nobility and entrenched powers. He wanted to reform and innovate.
Luoyang, a city with deep-rooted ritual significance, was founded by Duke Zhou and sits at the heart of China, naturally predestined to be a royal capital. In his view, if he remained in Pingcheng to rule, how could he aspire to be a ruler in the mold of Yao or Shun?
To reunify southern China into his kingdom, he had to relocate the capital to the center of Han Chinese culture, thus drawing more deeply and comprehensively on the power of the Central Plains and southern China to achieve his grand enterprise.
The officials and the populace of Pingcheng were unprepared for the abrupt decision to move the capital. The artisans too, who worked tirelessly at Yungan, were caught off guard. Cave 3, the largest of the Yungan caves, was abandoned around this time. Only the rear chamber's walls had, at 1/3 of their height, sculptures of a Buddha and 2 bodhisattvas. And these 3 statues, in terms of style and craftsmanship, appear to belong to the early Tang, not Northern Wei.
That's why we speculate whether it was because when Emperor Xiaowen moved the capital to Luoyang in 494 AD, the shift of economic hub, the change of the capital, took both manpower and resources to Luoyang to excavate the Longmen Grottoes, leaving the Yungang Grottoes in the unfinished state we see today.
Luoyang has historically been prominent across the Central Plains. Emperor Xiaowen aspired to restore its glory. More importantly, he aimed to achieve a transformation of his Xianbei Empire, making it geographically and culturally more akin to the Central Plains. In the spring of 494 AD, he abolished the Xianbei's traditional sacrifice to heaven on the west outskirts. In the same year, he decreed Han clothing to replace Xianbei attire. On the 7th lunar month's 9th day, he mandated Han language to replace Xianbei language. Xianbei migrants in Luoyang were to register Luoyang as their ancestral home, and were prohibited from being buried in Pingcheng. 2 months later, he migrated all his family members and officials left behind in Pingcheng to Luoyang. The capital of Northern Wei, Luoyang, in the 5th century, was already a highly civilized metropolis. This ancient city, which witnessed the rise and fall of many dynasties, quickly regained vitality thanks to Talba Hong's efforts. The magnificent royal palace, neatly arrayed streets, beautiful gardens, numerous schools, enhanced public facilities, and over 1,000 serene Buddhist temples, made Luoyang absolutely the biggest and most beautiful city in the world at the time. Some scholars believe that Luoyang during the Northern Wei period was unprecedented in scale in history, and might have surpassed the believed biggest capital in feudal China, Chang'an City in the Sui and Tang periods.
Documents suggest that Luoyang during the Northern Wei period had over 320 lifeng. Thus, based on our excavations, we can basically reconstruct the layout and location of these lifeng.
But not everyone liked Luoyang. Many resisted the emperor's reforms in a passive way. Every summer, many Xianbei nobles returned to Pingcheng under the pretext of escaping the heat in Luoyang. Thus, without moving with the court to Luoyang, these aristocrats and officials, returning to Pingcheng each summer, began independently excavating caves on Wuzhou Mountain. These private sculptures characterized the late Yungang caves. These privately built statues were distributed across the east, middle, and west sections of the Yungang Grottoes. They are scattered across the cliffs like a honeycomb. Today, visiting these caves means climbing step by step. This site-specific excavation was obviously due to limited resources. Private-sponsored caves were small and informal, lacking the grandeur and extravagance of the past. Yet, as the imperial influence faded, these caves brought a new characteristic to the Yungang Grottoes. This is a reflection of folk culture. The walls of Cave 15 are adorned with a neat array of 1,000 Buddha sculptures, with over 13,000 figures still extant. Thus, it's known as the 1,000 Buddha Cave. The late Yungang caves exhibit a mix of elaborate carvings and simplified forms. Even among these decayed ruins, you can still find outstanding works. The flying apsaras on Cave 30's ceiling with delicate facial features and light movements are highlights of late Yungang's apsaras sculpture. Of the late Yungang caves, Cave 38 stands out the most. Situated in the western section, it is a small square cave, 2 meters above the ground, flanked by mollusk sculpture. The entrance displays an epigraph. The epigraph, with over 300 characters, tells us it was made by Wu Zhongwei for his late son, a third-rank general.
His son died on the battlefield. In memory of his son, he created this sculpture, wishing his son's swift ascent to the Pure Land.
Inside the niches along Cave 38's north wall is also a seated pair of Sakyamuni and Prabhudaratna, in loose monastic robes with broad sashes. On the niche's lintel sit 9 small meditative Buddhas. The base of this niche features 2 pictures of the pole performing entertainment, secular dances and music spectacle. Pole performance was a type of acrobatics In these scenes, performers bend or pivot around a pole, accompanied by a drumming band for entertainment. This theme was common in Northern Wei tombs as well, primarily for entertainment and warding off evil. This is a set of Northern Wei clay acrobat figurines housed in the Datong Museum. It really resembles Cave 38's carvings, strongly evidencing the Yungang carving's evolution. The east wall of Cave 38 holds a two-tiered niche. The upper tier features a cross-legged Mithraea, while the base depicts offerings providers and the music tree. Buddhist scriptures describe, as breezes pass, the music tree gave forth music, a miraculous five-note melody. The artisans intricately carved multiple tiers of lively kamaras, emerging from lotus on the branches. All are seen playing instruments, replacing natural sounds with human music, making the conceptual music a visualized image. The southern wall's gate is flanked by 3 tiers of Buddha story niches. The lower story is embellished with lively animals among hills. 2 niches lie at the hill's base. One small, housing a meditating Ananda. Above him, Papian the Devamara in vulture form dives to disturb him. The Sakyamuni in the bigger niche stretches out his right hand through the wall to caress Ananda's head. Ananda's fears instantly vanish. This also embodies the father's concealed wishes. He hoped the Buddha could remove his son's fears in the last breath. Cave 38 delivers such diverse imagery. To achieve this, in such a confined space, a brief presentation of a highlighted theme, and such vivid images, clearly exhibit the craftsmanship of late Northern Wei sculptors. They infuse this cave with deep human sentiment, not solely to venerate, but, more crucially, to pray for the deceased, wishing them well.
If the early and mid-term Yungang caves honored the country, contributing to state fortunes, and praying for the state's fortune, which emphasized political significance, only in the late Yungang caves, exemplified by Cave 38, we see a shift to humanistic concerns.
While people couldn't emotionally accept the emperor's radical reforms, the enduring cultural integration gradually altered everything. 13 kilometers south of Luoyang city, the Yi River winds northward. The world-famous Longmen grottos were carved into the cliffs on either side. Although mostly carved during the Tang dynasty, Northern Wei played a key role in their initiation, because it was this dynasty that brought its ideas of art here. Yungang Cave is among the earliest excavated caves of the Longmen grottos. It was expanded from a natural karst cave with a vast space of over 800 cubic meters and adorned with over 1,000 niches. It houses the largest royal collection of votive Buddhist sculptures. It was excavated around the late period of Yungang. Right in the Yungang Cave center is the major Buddha Sakyamuni, whose slim visage and loose clothing with wide sashes also showed the late Yungan's aesthetic traits. In 499 AD, having established his power in Luoyang, Emperor Xiaowen waged war against southern Qi. Within a few centuries from the great Xianbei mountain to Pingqing, and then to Luoyang, from barbarians to a northern French kingdom and finally a civilized empire, the Xianbei people advanced more rapidly. Their dream of reuniting China was near. But fate had other plans. He succumbed to illness shortly after his campaign began. In the fields at the foot of Mon Mountain, 10 kilometers north of urban Luoyang, lies a large burial mound. the final resting place of Emperor Xiaowen, Talba Hong, known as the North Mang Long Tomb. In Datong's outskirts, not far from Feng's Grand Yonggu tomb where the late empress resides, Xiaowen's self-prepared tomb, Waniantang, stands deserted. His wish to be buried beside his grandmother was neglected, fading away like dust in the wind. As a significant monarch of his era, Talba Hong died with unfulfilled wishes. Laid to rest far from his grandmother, in Luoyang, over 700 kilometers away, a poignant silence surrounds his story. Regardless of Talba Hong's complex feelings toward his grandmother, he supported Empress Dowager Feng's policies. He pursued reforms with even more urgency after Feng's demise. The death of Feng granted Talba Hong authentic imperial power. He could finally enact his own plans as he would. Under his reign, the integration of Xianbei and Han cultures was thoroughly completed. After Talba Hong passed away, sporadic excavations occurred on the remote Wuzhou mountain. Cave 4 of the Yungang Grottoes lies at the bend of the Dragon King Temple Gully. Even from outside the cave, it's clear that this cave remains unfinished. The entrance has yet to be carved. Inside this excavated cave with sculptures nearly complete, the intricate detailing is absent. On entering, one notes a distinct feature, a 1.5-meter gap from arch to ground. So if one wants to explore the cave, climbing is necessary. This random site selection, in late Yungan, was due to shifts from imperial to private funding. Regardless, the rough execution was evidently not the builder's original intent. Some unforeseen events must have led to its abandonment. Cave 4 is small, with a thin ceiling. The inside sculptures are heavily weathered. On the east, west and south walls, a Buddha and 2 bodhisattvas are faintly visible. Apsaras and lotus motifs decorate the ceiling. These figures hold little value now. Yet a unique finding from the 1940s adds significance, a carved epigraph. This inscription reveals that Cave 4 was created by a woman surnamed Zhou for her deceased husband during the Zhenguang era of Northern Wei. It's the latest documented epigraphic sculpture of the Yungang Grottoes, marking the end of Yungan's large-scale cave carvings. It aligns with the Great Tongue Bibliographia of Buddhist scriptures and Jin Dynasty steles stating that it ended in the Zhenguang period. Over 60 characters constitute this informative epigraph to the sculpture, "For my departed husband, palace attendant," which makes this inconspicuous cave stand out in Yungan's 1-kilometer expanse. After Emperor Xiaowen's death, Northern Wei experienced a brief flourishing period. Luck didn't remain, however. By the Zhenguang era, civil and military affairs fell into disarray. The dynasty was heading towards its downfall. In 524 AD, a large-scale rebellion took place in North China, known as the Revolt of the Six Garrisons. The imperial army was defeated continually and driven back to Pingcheng. During this turmoil, stonework at Wuzhou Mountain was forced to cease and never resumed. Cave 4 became the last note of Yungan's finale. Time stopped in the Zhenguang era. Around 520 to 525 AD. When Pingcheng stopped being the capital, the center of state operations, it declined from then on. Former imperial splendor vanished, turning into mere memories. After the Revolt of the Six Garrisons, Pingcheng suffered pillaging, slaughter, and fires, with the Yungang Grottoes enduring cycles of destruction and repair across 1,000 years. In peace, people reverently restored these deities. But in times of conflict, the grottos faced theft and damage. Let alone the ravages of floods and weathering for years and years. The open-air Great Buddha in Cave 20 is well known. But its exposure was entirely accidental. In the Northern Wei period, this cave had ever collapsed, destroying a standing Buddha in the west, and exposing the major Buddha statue. In 1992, archaeologists found remnants of this standing Buddha, west of Cave 20. Reconstruction fell to Yuan Xiaozhong. While sorting fragments, Yuan Xiaozhong found some fresh red color in the hands of the west standing Buddha. That is cinnabar red, a Northern Wei signature. Buried underground, and shielded from heavy rains, some color remained. In other words, during the Northern Wei period, these statues were originally colored, though over time, the colors faded away.
Besides this standing Buddha statue, the outer wall with 1,000 Buddhas was probably painted. The 1,000 Buddha sculpture was gilded with gold foil. This might have been the next phase. It may not have been applied during the initial excavation, but afterward. Possibly in the Northern Wei period. Or during the Liao and Jin periods, when it was regilded and painted. However, the colors of the west standing Buddha were preserved during the collapse. It collapsed in the Northern Wei period, so the colors must have been applied at that time. The statues were painted immediately after they were carved.
Yuan Xiaozhong envisions Yungan, once adorned with vibrant, gilded statues and sculptures. What a magnificent splendor that must have been. Though the past grandeur has faded, these fragmented sculptures still move and inspire us. The ambitious Xianbei people migrated from the steppes to Pingcheng and unified northern China. They embraced all ethnic cultures, building, with inclusivity, a holy land of myriad Buddhas upon the cliffs, rich in artistic beauty. This Buddha-filled land showcases the evolution of Buddhist art, from Gandhara to indigenous Chinese styles. Behind this lay a transformative culture. As the regime transitioned from nomadic life to settled agriculture, and established its unique revolutionary culture. Such transformation was like struggling to build a bridge that led the ancient Chinese society to its zenith in the Tang dynasty. Yungan stands as an enduring landmark, guiding us through the vast history to find Northern Wei, a dynasty filled with faith and passion, and etching its name in mountains and stones.